Ever spend all spring nurturing your fruit trees? Dreaming of that juicy, like, summer harvest,
Yeah.
only to go out there and find that there's like a whole flock of, feathered freeloaders having a party in your backyard.
Yeah.
Talk about frustrating.
Right.
But, fear not, fellow gardeners, because we are diving deep into a solution this week,
Absolute.
courtesy of the University of California's Integrated Pest Management Program.
Yes.
They're like the fruit tree protectors of the West Coast.
They really are a fantastic resource. Their publications have this great way of combining like scientific rigor with really practical advice, which is what we need for this situation, I think.
Totally. And you know me, I'm always down for a little animal espionage.
Yeah.
So, like, first things first, who are we dealing with? The UC IPM guide lays out kind of like the usual suspects, And I was kind of surprised to see sparrows and finches on that list. I always thought they just, like, stuck to, bird feeders and seed.
They do love their seed mix, but all those little guys, especially during nesting season, they need a lot more energy. And the guide even says that their diet actually changes a bit throughout the year. So, like, in the springtime, they might be more focused on insects, but then come summertime when your fruit's ripening,
Yeah.
they're going to go for that.
Makes them opportunistic.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, and then, of course, there are the fruit fans, like your robins and your mockingbirds.
Your jays.
Oh, and the scrub jays. Don't forget about the scrub jays.
The scrub jays are crafty.
Always one step ahead.
And that's why it's so important to know what you're looking at, right? Like really being able to identify the birds that are in your yard, because it's not enough to know like, oh, that's a sparrow or that's a finch.
Right.
The UC IPM guide really stresses how the regulations around dealing with these birds is different depending on the species.
Wait, really? So there are like actual laws about what you can and can't do to a bird that's like snacking on your peaches?
Oh, yeah.
Get out.
Yeah, you can get yourself into some trouble.
Wow.
There are some birds that are protected by what's called the Migratory Bird Treaty Act.
Okay.
And under that act, you need special permits to even like remove a nest, let alone try to trap the birds or move them somewhere else.
I had no idea. I guess my like childhood dreams of being like a backyard vigilante are officially like,
I wouldn't say a vigilante.
Well, not a vigilante, but I have to like, know the law.
Be informed.
Yeah.
That's really what the UC IPM guide stresses, I think. It's like having a legal advisor for your backyard bird battles.
I love it. All right, so we've got our lineup of, these feathered suspects.
Yeah.
We've got newfound respect for like, bird law.
Right.
What do we do? What are our battle strategies? I'm guessing the UCIPM guide has some thoughts.
Oh, they definitely do. And they go way beyond, just putting a scarecrow in your backyard.
Okay.
They get into like the real science behind what actually deters birds, and it's pretty fascinating.
Ooh, I love it when they get sciencey.
Yeah.
Give me the details.
Well, they start with a really classic one, which is netting.
Okay.
Seems simple enough, right? You just cover your trees and then your fruit's protected.
Yeah.
But even netting has like a whole bunch of little nuances.
Oh, I bet. Like what kind of netting you should use.
Exactly, how to attach it to the trees.
Right.
The guide really stresses that you should use netting with really small mesh so that the birds can't get their little heads stuck in it.
Oh, that makes sense.
And also making sure that it's really taut and tied down so that there's no sagging. Because
you can't get in?
Yeah, they can get in if it's sagging.
It's like they have engineering degrees.
Right.
They can find any loophole.
They're crafty.
So, okay, netting, we got that. But the guide also talks about like those noise-making deterrents. Are we talking about like, those ultrasonic devices that are supposed to like drive pests away?
Yeah.
Do those things actually work?
That's where the science gets really interesting. Because according to this guide, birds are incredibly adaptable.
Okay.
So while they might get startled by like a loud noise or something unexpected,
Right.
they pretty quickly learn that if it's not associated with a real threat,
Okay.
then they're just going to ignore it.
So like playing a recording of like a hawk screech on a loop?
Yeah.
Probably not going to work for very long.
Exactly. It just becomes background noise.
Right.
The guide really stresses that the key here is unpredictability.
Okay.
So think about things like combining visual deterrence with noise and movement.
Okay.
Like they even talk about using reflective tape.
Yeah.
Or those shiny pinwheels that spin in the wind.
Oh, that's smart. So like a whole like backyard like disco party to keep the birds like disoriented. Like, what is this mad? I can't even concentrate on stealing this cherry with all this like sparkle.
I'm not sure that's what's going on in their heads, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
It's about keeping them on edge.
Okay.
They even suggest moving the deterrents around every couple of days just to keep them guessing.
That's smart. Okay, so I'm loving all these like humane strategies.
Yeah.
But what happens when you've tried it all and you still got like, some birds who are just determined? I've heard of people like resorting to trapping. Right. Is that something that the UC IPM guide recommends?
They do talk about trapping, but they are really careful about it.
Okay.
They say it should really be a last resort.
Okay.
And that even then, it's not as simple as just like catching them and then releasing them somewhere else.
Yeah, because doesn't that just move the problem? It doesn't actually solve the problem.
Exactly. A lot of these birds have really strong homing instincts.
Okay.
So they might just like find their way back to your yard after you release them.
Right.
Or even worse, they might not survive in a new environment.
Oh, so then what? What do you do if you trap them and you can't release them?
Well, and that's the really tough question. And the UC IPM guide doesn't like shy away from it.
Yeah.
They really emphasize the importance of responsible pest management.
Right.
And sometimes that means having a plan for humane euthanasia if relocation isn't an option.
Wow. I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So it really is so much more complicated than I think we give it credit for.
Right.
Are there any other options that the guide mentions? What about like chemical repellents? Have you heard of those?
They do mention those, but again, they kind of present the good and the bad sides of those as well.
Okay, so break that down for me. What are we talking about with chemical repellents, and like, how do they even work?
So some repellents work by making the fruit taste bad to the birds.
Okay.
So they'll include something that's like bitter or unpleasant to the bird.
But not to us.
Right, exactly. But totally fine for humans to eat.
Okay.
And then others will actually like irritate their feet or their beak when they try to land on something or peck at it.
Interesting. So it's not like masking the smell of the fruit, but it's like actually making the fruit itself like unappealing.
Exactly.
But do those methods actually work? I feel like the birds would get used to it eventually.
Yeah, you would think so. And I think the guide kind of hints at that.
Okay.
They say that the effectiveness can really vary. And it depends on like the type of bird you have, the specific product you're using, even the time of year.
Wow.
So again, it comes back to knowing your backyard and really paying attention.
Yeah.
And they really stress that you've got to follow the instructions.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to harm other animals or the environment.
Right, of course.
So use caution with those.
It's like there's no magic bullet when it comes to like protecting your precious fruit trees.
I know. I wish there was.
Right?
It would make things so much easier.
So for those listening out there, what's like the biggest takeaway? What should they remember from this whole conversation and from this guide?
I think what I'm taking away from this UC IPM guide is to be observant.
Okay.
Really be a student of your backyard.
Like
what kind of birds do you actually have coming to your yard? Yeah. What are they eating? When are they eating it? How are they behaving?
Right.
And you can use those observations to figure out what strategies make the most sense for you.
I love that. We're not just gardeners.
Right.
We're like backyard detectives trying to,
a little bit
outsmart these feathered foes.
Yeah.
So to everyone listening out there, channel your inner, bird nerd experiment.
To be afraid to try some of these things. And, maybe sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Or at least like a well-timed, disco ball or something.
Exactly.
Happy gardening, everyone.